States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. It's always wonderful to do that with all of you. Tonight we have two items for a public hearing about cargo trailer sales in Shorelands Commerce Park and the DeVore property rezone. So those are items that we will open the microphones to discuss those issues. But right now we always have an open session to discuss any other issues outside of those. So I just wanted to make that clear that we will be discussing those issues, any of you that are here to address those issues. So outside of those issues, you're welcome to come up to this microphone, trying to limit your comments to 2 to 3 minutes, and to just state, if you're inclined to do so, your name and where you're from for the record. So I will open that up right now if anyone desires to do that. Seeing no takers on that, then we'll move on from the open session and to the business of the meeting. And the business of the meeting brings us to the first item, which is the public hearing and the allow cargo trailer sales in Shorelands Commerce Park. This was something that was tabled from our meeting 2 weeks ago. We now have a zoning text amendment on that. And so it was brought up before, but is there any, do we have, who could refresh us on that? Mackenzie? Okay, thanks. Come on up, Mackenzie. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. So this item, as was tabled from the last meeting, is to add vehicle and equipment rental or sale to the conditional permit use in the Shorelands Commerce Park zone, which is, for the public, this is the zone in the west part of Centerville, west of I-15, and north of Parish Lane. The applicant has requested that it be added to the uses so that it can be a primary use in one of his buildings as one of his tenants. And as of yet, most of the uses that are allowed in the Shorelands Commerce Park are services, there's some manufacturing, restaurants and schools, and then the conditional uses open it up a little bit more broadly. And so this is just an application to add one more item to that list. And vehicle and equipment rental or sale does not enable large-scale new or used car lots, just to clarify the definition of that.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Any questions for her right at this point on that refresher?
Yeah. Yes. What would preclude that from becoming a, quote, large car lot?
The definition in the definitions list, let me pull it up. So the definition of vehicle and equipment rental or sale is an establishment engaged in the retail or wholesale sale or rental from the premises of equipment or motorized vehicles except motorcycles, automobiles, and light trucks, along with incidental service or maintenance. Typical uses include new and used truck sales and rental, boat sales, construction equipment rental yards, moving truck and trailer rental, and farm equipment and machinery sales and rental. So in the definition, it excludes...
Wasn't that contradictory that
it's
excluded it in one place?
Motorcycles, automobiles, and light trucks is the one thing excluded. Other types of trucks are included.
Do we limit the size of the lot or the amount of vehicles that can be on it?
Not that I'm aware of.
Any other questions right now for, thanks, Mackenzie.
Okay.
This is, there's an applicant on this, Craig Salmon. He's spoke before. Craig, do you want to speak again before we do another public hearing on it?
I'm Craig Salmon. I'm on a petition in this request, but I'm with the councilman. I'm a little confused on the definition. That's a little confusing to me, although it doesn't really affect mine, but I'm like, you're saying sales of vehicles and light and rental, but then you include larger trucks but not smaller trucks, and I'm just a little confused with that. Why that definition? Or maybe we need to open it up. I'm not saying I need it, but I'm just saying for general use of that zone, but anyway.
Can we get that definition again, Mackenzie?
Yeah,
Is
that
that
would
something we
be-
can bring up on text?
Let's get some clarification there.
I'll read the definition of vehicle first. Properly licensed automobile, truck, trailer, boat, or other device in which a person or thing is or can be transported. And then the definition that is up to be added is vehicle and equipment rental or sale, an establishment engaged in the retail or wholesale sale or rental of equipment or equipment or motorized vehicles, except motorcycles, automobiles, and light trucks, along with incidental service or maintenance. Typical uses include new and used truck sales and rental, boat sales, construction equipment rental yards, moving truck and trailer rental, and farm equipment and machinery sales and rental. Yeah, it's at the bottom. So there's a handful of vehicle definitions. There you go. Can you get that bigger, please? So vehicle rental or sale new limited is where motorcycles, automobiles, and light trucks can be sold, which includes major dealers in that new section. Corey?
Mayor, if I could just step in. So Mackenzie's the staff planner on this project. Motor vehicles is all kinds of things. So if you look at an RV dealership, Class C motorhomes and so forth, that would be an RV dealership. And so you're looking at that. Caterpillar trucks, your snowplow trucks, those type of vehicles are equipment, considered under the definition of equipment. It's your personal vehicles, your pickup trucks, your Mercedes-Benz or your Hyundai, whatever you prefer. Those are the ones that are excluded and considered as a different type of vehicle and a different use. And so that's part of the discussion was at the Planning Commission that I brought up is, you know, a Caterpillar truck, the lift trucks, scissor lifts, those kind of are all equipment. And so that's the type of equipment you're looking at, and they can be motorized. So your personal vehicles that you typically see on the road, that's excluded. But your heavy industrial equipment, snowplow trucks, dump trucks, Caterpillar, backhoes, scissor lifts, recreational vehicles, boats, those are all considered equipment. And so that's the difference between the two. Well, it's the best difference,
Good
debatable,
clarification.
but that's the difference.
Nice to know.
Thanks.
Is that cleared up? Craig, did you have more before?
I'm curious why you wouldn't add, and I'm not pushing for it, but I'm thinking, why wouldn't you add the other
Because
type
you
of
don't,
vehicles?
because you don't want to go back to square one and start all over.
You're right, I don't. And so what you're saying is if we ever have that desire or something like that, then bring it forth again? Okay, I'm with you. But I'm just like, I'm wondering why we wouldn't do it, open that up for that zone, because I do think you're gonna get that push for it further north, you know, if that road maybe extends along the Legacy Highway. And it would be an awesome, you know, revenue generated for tax base and stuff for the state, but, or for the city, I mean, but
It
anyway.
would leave us nothing to argue about on those cold winter nights when it's empty in here, so.
Okay.
but-
No more, Craig? Any other questions for Craig before I open this up for public hearing? Okay, this is a public hearing matter, and so I will open it up for public hearing at this point in time. So the public hearing is now open. If no response on that matter, I will close the public hearing. And we will entertain any further questions, if any. If not, then I will look for a motion on this issue.
Well, this was tabled from last meeting because there wasn't an ordinance. And also, I appreciated the respect shown by the council members that knew I had an opinion on this matter and the opportunity to state that opinion. I understand when looking at this application at a micro level and just this application, why it would have passed through the Planning Commission, absolutely. But I look at things more through a macro lens. And so there's one line in this staff report that's the very most important to me, and that says, the Shorelines Commerce Park does not yet have a precedent set for which set of uses are preferred in the zone. I have been working here at City Hall for many, many years, and I was on the Planning Commission when we wrote the Shorelands Commerce Park ordinance. And from my perspective, the goal for that area was jobs creation and hopefully a higher end kind of business park area. So I'll also go really quickly to, from the Shorelands Commerce Park ordinance, its purpose statement: provide for a master planned, architecturally designed development with customized requirements and standards to permit flexibility and initiative in property development. Facilitate the integration of diverse but compatible uses, including but not limited to industrial, commercial, limited residential, mixed node, and other community uses. Better preserve and enhance the property and neighborhood through integrated planning and design that would not be possible under other existing zoning regulations of the city. So we very intentionally placed ordinance in that area to try to encourage it to be a higher level of quality. So the concerns that I have are, we have that area, and then we have surrounding areas that we have yet to fully master plan. And there's a lot of potential down there, I think. And so when you combine the perspective that I'm coming from historically in placing that ordinance and the statement in the staff report saying there isn't a precedent yet set, I'm very concerned about opening this door to, and you made my argument for me actually, Craig. Not only is this opening a door to something different than I imagined for the area, something much more industrial, heavy equipment oriented, but also placing this on the use list actually opens the door for that next step argument of, well, automobile sales just also makes sense. And without having master planned the area, I'm concerned about saying we want to open that door. Maybe we will once we go through that process thoroughly, but that hasn't been decided and fully evaluated yet. So my leaning right now for tonight is to push pause. I don't feel comfortable opening that door by adding this to the use list currently.
So Tammy, quick question. As far as the other compatible uses, what does industrial connotate to you?
Well, so that's actually one thing I also was going to mention is that this was 10 years ago and there was no plan for the west area. So we were trying to be delicate and integrate the fact that there was existing industrial uses there. And I personally think we're due and overdue for a refresh. And like I say, a look at not only the Shorelands Commerce Park section, but the entire section, both in writing ordinance, in deciding CDA efforts, things like that, for a whole vision down there and the acres that we have. So we know we're pushing for that road to be built. And so when that road is built, then we're going to have things happen down there. And I think it's the city's responsibility, this council's responsibility, to thoroughly evaluate and make that plan and have that in place first rather than piecemeal. So to answer your question, yes, industrial and manufacturing even is written in the Shorelands Commerce Park ordinance. And that's why I understand from a micro standpoint the Planning Commission's decision. Because if you look at that and you say, well, this isn't that far off of that, and so let's go ahead and just approve it. But I'm saying I think it's all due for a refresh and for putting in context of the entire area.
So let me take it from a different standpoint. As a potential property holder in the area, what do you think that message sends to business owners? You can't make money on your property until we figure out what the master plan is for your area?
Right, and so if I weren't so concerned about it opening a door that then would be very difficult to close later, I would understand that argument, and I would say, okay, well, let's go ahead and vote yes on this now, and then maybe we'll change our mind later. But I worry that it opens a door that becomes hard to close, so.
But I guess where I'm having a problem is I don't understand what's wrong with the door. So let's take, for example, at a future point, I'm just gonna use the classic example that gets thrown around at this council is if Mercedes-Benz had come to us and said, we see that you're doing equipment sales and rental, we think that Mercedes-Benz dealership would be fantastic on your west side. Why would we say no to that?
Well, I have answers to that question, but that would be part of that extensive planning process, right? I have a perspective to that question, but I don't think that's the issue for tonight.
Well, but it is though, because you're saying we don't want to do this because of what that door opens. I'm saying, to me, that's the end of that door.
Okay.
Would be, so I'm not
Well,
understanding.
What I'd be stating tonight is my opinion and not, I can't predict what that thorough planning process would end up resulting in. So I will state my opinion, but my argument for tonight is the fact that that planning process for that whole west area hasn't been decided yet. And so I don't think we could say yay or nay to a Mercedes-Benz dealership right now because we haven't looked at the area as a whole and what our goals are. But the general principle that I would go by is that we do have very limited available land in Centerville, and so we want to make sure that we're very deliberate about how that develops and that it's reaching all of our overarching goals. And so that's why I would shoot for having that planning process in place first and having a master plan for the west side in place first.
But there was a planning process, and it came up with a definition, and that definition includes industrial, and we have a property owner who wants to use the definition that's in place and expand that use for the definition that is already there that you read to us in order to make money so that we can have increased sales tax in our city. Why is that a problem?
Well, I think I've thoroughly explained, so I can understand the logic behind the Planning Commission's decision, and I'd be able to understand the logic if we said, well, this is already in place, so this is already in place and it's over here, let's go one step further, which is what this is doing, right? It's taking that one step further. So this is here, let's go one step further. I can understand that logic. What I'm saying is from my perspective, I would say this is in place, and I would imagine if we evaluated the entire area, we might choose to take a step this direction.
But we're not the property owner, and he is the property owner, and he has something that he wants to do there that's fairly well aligned with what's already written there. So I think it's a great idea.
That's great. That's the constant tension we have to battle with, is the property owner's rights, which I fully respect, and the purpose of land use planning in the community.
Well, I think it's also important to note this is covered under conditional use. So I think that some of those concerns can be dealt with as part of the conditional use process as well. But I am not saying that a planning effort doesn't need to take place, but given what we heard last week about 50 units a year, not a significant monetary bump to the city at this point, but also from that perspective, on the flip side, it's very meaningful to the property owner to have the space leased and generating income. I don't see those as incompatible right now, and being able to say, yes, let's put a stake in the ground and look at the planning process for the west side. But at the same time, I have no issues moving forward with this so that we're not disadvantaging a property owner while we're making up our minds.
I can respect that. I asked the council to just be sure that as long as they realize that when they're adding this use, then the entire acreage of Shorelands Commerce Park, in theory, could become heavy equipment, vehicle sales or rentals. So,
In theory.
In theory.
An interesting thing that I found as I was researching it is they can already build the trailers down there, they just can't sell them. So to me, I'd almost rather having selling them than building them. So I'm not sure the door that we're opening is any bigger than the door we already have, because they could already be making the trailers down there.
agreed.
And that we wouldn't have to give permission for. I mean, that's already an ordinance.
And that doesn't generate anything for the city.
I know.
They ship them out somewhere else.
Can I ask either Corey or Mackenzie a question?
Yeah, Craig, let's go, Craig go first
ahead.
if you had something to say.
I'm curious,
Corey and Mackenzie come up.
what, this is a conditional use permit. So tell me, and I know look, we have the ordinances down there, the sign ordinances and the, we can't store things in the house, I mean, a lot of, it's a clean environment down there. That's what the ordinance dictates. And the signage, all that dictates that. So I'm a little bit, how would you, when it's a conditional use, what does that really mean? Does it mean that if somebody abuses it, then they can say you're out of there? Or, what I mean? Or any other concerns that you may have that maybe are already in the ordinance, what I mean? If they're, I don't know how that conditional use applies. I guess that's my question. But I think, to me, it does.
So
It's
Lisa,
conditional on, all these things you're.
Just ready to jump.
Lisa, I'm going to put you on the spot. Conditional use. Are you the one to answer that for us legally?
Any of us can. Legally tag on.
We go over this a lot, yeah.
So our uses are either
I'm doing it
permitted,
for Craig's and the audience sake, from our city attorney.
so uses are either permitted or conditional. A conditional use has a higher level of scrutiny, but we have to look and see if there's any negative impacts that are, the project is proposing, and if there are known negative impacts, then we can try to mitigate those with conditions. But there are other requirements in the Shoreline Commerce Park zone that will probably regulate this use as well, maybe even more so than a conditional use, but we will be looking at things during the conditional use process. So that's, staff is recommending this as a conditional use, not a permitted outright use.
Thank you. Corey or Mackenzie, Councilman Ince had a question. Or wanted a response to it.
I don't want to step on Mackenzie's toes. This has been something, she's a project, so you can ask the question and she can just look at me like.
Whoever can
Help me
answer
out.
it. In the 2 weeks in between, I drove through and looked, but failed to take an inventory of the businesses that are already there. Can either of you sketch for me an inventory of the businesses that are already there? Because I'm inclined to side with the property owner because I think it fits, but give me a sketch of the uses that are there.
So currently, there's only 2 bits of land that are in the zone that are under development, and there is your property, which Craig could answer you more than I could because he owns the building. But there are some gyms. Are you there as well? Or are you across the way?
No, we're there. We manufacture heating and air conditioning, ductwork, and that type of stuff. There's a True Golf there that manufactures golf simulating computerized machines and sells them all over the United States, at least, maybe even the world. And then there's Kona Karate. There's a dance. There's Wasatch Cross Fitness there. There's it's called Project Move, a dance place. Another company there is they install propane kits for manufacturers of Chevy and different things like that for run on propane, and simulators to do that to make sure they dial them in right. But then there's another company there that does supplements, vitamins, and things like that they
Really?
manufacture and sell. Okay. We are the first, Corey, if I'm right, we are the first in the shoreland design.
Correct.
And so we have been dealing with you on this shoreland design for a long time.
Greg, I like the way you said dealing with the council rather than me right now.
We're much nicer than
I
Corey.
thought I was looking at you.
Corey and I, it's been a work in progress, I'm sure for you too, but Corey and I are the ones that have been, throwing our heads against the wall to try to work through this to figure out exactly how we want, how you want it to work and how they want it to work and how we want, so it's been a work in motion. And I think, honestly, if you go down there and look at it, I think it really looks nice. I think the city's done a good job with what they've done, and I think the businesses are clean, and we continually have to monitor our tenants to make sure that they're clean and, keep things out of sight and, keep things tidy and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, Corey and I, we've had a long relationship over this shoreline design. And it's
I like you, Councilman.
Love-hate too,
Ince.
right?
drove down there and I walked around. I didn't go on any side of the buildings. I guess I could have gone in and said hi to you, Craig, but yeah, it looks very nice right now. Yeah, it really does. Very clean.
Thank you.
And I think that the conditional use permit process will help ensure that. That's why I really don't have a problem. I'm going to go ahead and motion that we adopt ordinance 2019-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We've had quite a discussion on it, but any last words? If not, we'll start a vote. Starting at the end. Councilwoman Meekum.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 4-1. Thank you. Thanks for all the input. Very good discussion. Appreciate all the points that were brought up. Let's go to item number 2 on the agenda. This is also another public hearing matter. This is a Devore property rezone from agricultural low to residential low. I believe that on the staff presentation on this will also be from Mackenzie Wood.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. So this item is brought to you from the Planning Commission with an applicant of Russell Wilson representing Symphony Homes. The Planning Commission approved this item 5-0. So what's being proposed is a rezone. Can you find either of the reports will work? And then go to the map. So there are 5 parcels in this area that the applicant wishes to rezone from agricultural low to residential low. So in the zoning ordinance, there are 4 things to review when looking at a rezone application. And so those are, is the proposed amendment consistent with goals, objectives, and policies of the city's general plan? And currently the general plan has a goal to ensure compatible land use patterns and transitions. Currently, it would be a low density to another low density. And then to preserve semi-rural properties for current owners and to preserve viability of the area for future development. And so what that means is that we won't sweepingly say all of this will be residential, every parcel in this whole neighborhood, but just parcel by parcel, application by application. And so only these 5 parcels are up for rezone and nobody else. And that second part, preserve viability of the area for future development, meaning property owners can have the opportunity to rezone in the future when they so desire. Currently, there are several single-family residential low areas nearby this property. So it is consistent with the neighborhood. So to the west and south is Lexington Park subdivision, which is residential low. Across Main Street is more residential low. To the north is agricultural low, and then a PDO, which is Woods Park. So the second thing to review is the proposed amendment harmonious with the overall character of existing development? And so this would just further the residential low. It wouldn't be an island. Some previous applications have created one parcel in a sea of agricultural low. This would not do that. The third item, what is the extent to which the proposed amendment may adversely affect adjacent property? It came up in the public hearing during Planning Commission that there are drainage issues in the area. As you all know, many drainage issues have come up to the City Council. And one thing in favor of this particular rezone is that it covers the whole swath from Main Street to the frontage road so that you can, or the developer can address drainage issues all at once, so that you're not creating drainage issues for people farther down the line. Everybody in that rezone would be affected at the same time. The drainage the whole way could be addressed. And then the fourth item is what is the adequacy of facilities and services intended to serve the subject property? So staff have reviewed existing services nearby. There is a stub road, which you can see right in the middle, which would be an access point for services, as well as Main Street and possibly the frontage road. So that would enable services to be brought to this rezone location. There was a few things that were brought up in the public hearing, which I'm sure will be brought up again. But mostly that drainage issue, and then what would a rezone look like? So this is just the rezone. We don't have an application for the subdivision yet, so we can't say we're voting on the subdivision. We're just voting on the rezone at the moment. And if and when they come with a subdivision application, that would go through the Planning Commission public hearing, as well as come back to you for a public hearing. But one issue that I heard and wanted to address is that if a development is created and streets are added, streets would only be added into this area. We wouldn't unilaterally cut through all undeveloped land to connect to Lund Lane. And the issue of traffic has come up, which would once again have to be under review through staff process at the subdivision application. But I know there's lots of comments and lots of concerns about this, but staff recommends the rezone as well as the Planning Commission.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Council, any questions for Mackenzie?
Sure, I'm going to go back to the drainage issue.
Yes.
Sometimes definitions of individual words get us in hot water. When you say the developer could address the issue all at once, they are not required to.
So as part of the
Is that a fair statement?
they would have to address the drainage.
Okay.
Part of the subdivision process is a soil study as well as a drainage study. They would have to create a stormwater plan. So that is part of what's required from the city, as well as I think there are some state statutes as well that would be required at subdivision.
That's part of the subdivision
That's
process.
That's
and that
correct.
they'll have to meet adequacy requirements. But that's on not all parcels, just whatever they're platting for the subdivision, right?
That's correct. Anything that they'd be developing, they would have to do drainage.
Right, that's why I wanted to make a distinction that you had said they could go from Main Street all the way over, but depending on how they phase in their build and how they plat this, that's not necessarily going to happen.
If I understand what you're asking, is if
Corey's
they connect.
leaping to his feet, so
I think what I said is,
yeah,
so they may not connect the road to frontage road, they may not connect to Main
Right.
Street, but whatever they developed would have to be, all the drainage would have to be addressed either in phases or all at once.
So I guess what I think he's saying is, if they decided to develop the first 5 acres up next to Main Street, that wouldn't take the drainage all the way down to frontage road. So,
Yeah, the drainage pattern would force that no matter. So your question is what if they do a partial? Their indication, they're gonna build the whole thing at once. The likelihood, the layout, and the narrowness of the property to connect the roads correctly and put the infrastructure in, it's likely gonna be the entire property. But your question is adequate. What if they do the upper half and don't do the lower half? If they do that, they still have to connect. Our main drainage system for that property is going to be on the frontage road. So they will build the trunk line for the drainage and stormwater to the frontage road. So even if they didn't develop the west half of the property, all the east half would have to have a trunk line taken down through the west half of the property and connected to the frontage road automatically. So it will develop as a whole system for that property. Will it solve the drainage problems north of it? No, it won't. There'll still be some of the elements that have been reported to you about how that drainage works. I mean, we've handled Pine Creek with the upgrade of Woods Park. I know people are upset with Woods Park, but it did pay for the upsize 24-inch line, getting it under UTA and the Union Pacific tracks so we could drain the property. That handles most of Pine Creek. It handles the drainage from Woods Park. But the upper east half of the properties that are not able to connect to that system is where you hear some of those drainage questions coming up. And it's because those properties are not developed. As soon as those properties develop, that water will run then into that system. In this case, it will be a system that will run from Main Street to frontage road to handle the subdivision, even if it's developed in parts.
Sometimes at Mackenzie, it takes two people to translate what I'm saying, so no, you were fine.
So don't go away. So are you telling us that the difficulty of Woods Park is because there is so much not developed around it, and that Woods Park difficulties are going to go away?
Yeah, the Woods Park handles and manages its drainage. Now, that doesn't mean that some of the claims of people's sprinklers spraying over the other side and leaking under the fence goes away. That happens. But the drainage, the stormwater management plan takes Woods Park and delivers it into the stormwater management system. The other part is east of it and a little bit southeast of it. There are some low spots in that don't drain. They didn't drain when Woods Park wasn't developed. Part of it did drain, part of it did not drain. I know Mr. Wright had to pump from his basement long before Woods Park came. The question is where does he run the pumping of the water out? Back out onto the lot, which goes back into the groundwater, or run it out to Lund Lane. He used to run it out a ditch that he sold property on. And then he sold that property, and that cut off his access for that drainage. But they're actually physically in a low spot. And until that low spot's risen, and raised up for development, because that's what will likely happen, because you've got a high water table as you get further west, so you'll see more partial basements just like you do at Woods Park. Then the stormwater management will handle the rest of that remaining water that sits on those undeveloped properties. But until then, there's some low spots that it accumulates to.
Thank you.
That was the only question I had at this point. I'm sure after we have public comment, there'll probably be some more.
Thank you. If no further questions right now for staff, we will look, if there's an applicant present, would you like to comment? Come on up, introduce yourself and where you're from.
Sure. My name is Bruce Robinson. I'm an owner of Symphony Homes, Symphony Development Corporation. As a matter of interest, I was raised in North Bountiful and Centerville, and I have a lot of family that still lives up here. And we like Centerville enough, we located our corporate office here. I have to commute 25 miles a day to it, but we love being up in Centerville, and we appreciate the issues that you deal with here. Back in 2000, around 2000 or so, we bought land from the Rigby family and developed Lexington Park under the existent rules and zoning at that time. In conjunction with that, we purchased some additional land just to the north of Lexington Park, and at the time came in and had several meetings with Fred Campbell, who at the time was the city engineer, and I can't remember who the city planner was at that time, but talked about the extension of our development up into that area with this land that we had acquired, and it fit at the time the master plan and the zoning, and it all seemed to be a natural extension of what we had been doing. As we laid out plans to develop it, it became apparent to us that the development, if we went ahead with it, with the current acreage we had, it would create a less than ideal development. It came clear to us that really our land needed to be developed in conjunction with the DeVore property. And so we patiently waited, and the DeVores have finally gotten to a point where they've decided to sell their land, and we've under contract to purchase it. And now we feel like we can do a wonderful development there where we can connect everything properly, optimize the lot layout and the road flow, and take care of many issues and develop this as it should be developed. And so we're asking you to rezone this to the RL zoning. Our plan is to build approximately 60 homes on the site. The homes we estimate will run probably from $550,000 to well over $1 million. The more expensive homes on larger lots will be at the easterly side of the project. At the westerly side of the project, we'll probably have more smaller lots, but still lovely houses. Some people might wonder, who they're doing business with. I think in the case of this city and many of the communities in Davis County, we built thousands of homes in Davis County, had multiple parade homes, or as any builder or developer up here in upper ending housing, we're probably known as well as anybody. You can see our product all over the place and understand kind of the level of community that we deliver. We've not done as much in Centerville recently, but you're welcome to call Farmington and Kaysville, where we built hundreds and hundreds of homes in the last few years. Let me just address 2 or 3 things. One is the drainage issue. It's really an issue to be dealt with when the roads get engineered, but the standards of drainage have increased dramatically, in particular over about the last 7 or 8 years, mandated primarily by the state. And the problem that you have in some of the previous developments we did 20, 30 years ago is if you were in a high water area, you would develop the land and you would raise the roads. And the front yards would drain to the road, but the backyards were left with a low area. And the theory at the time was the soil was permeable enough, and we had soil studies, that you would push the water to drainage easement and then it would primarily drain from east to west, the natural slope of the land in Centerville. The multiple challenges with that include, among other things, when we get done building homes, people change the grade when they landscape, people build sheds and block drainage, all kinds of issues. And it was less than ideal, and truthfully, there are probably people out there that have been frustrated about drainage all over the community for these reasons. In recent times now, we're actually required, and I think it's a wonderful idea, to come in where these areas are low, and we actually run secondary drainage systems up through the backyard so that not only the rain gutters off the back of the house, but the drainage in the back of the house drains to a low spot on the lot that collects into a pipe and drains out underneath the road and out, in this case, to the west, out to the detention basin. And so I think with current standards, we should be able to engineer this so that we take care of a lot of drainage issues that may have existed in the past but should no longer exist based on the way things are getting developed. A second issue is traffic, and I apologize, we can share this with us, we're happy to share this with the city, but we just got this in last night from the traffic engineer. We asked him to do a study based on what was presented at the Planning Commission. And again, this is probably more relevant to zoning, but he looked at the project, and I'll just read his conclusion. We're happy to share the report with you. But his conclusion based on our proposal was this sentence: the traffic generated by the site is expected to have minimal impact on the surrounding roadway network. And there's a lot of data in here that he uses to support that. There is a paradox to this development with traffic. The worst traffic problem occurs around Reading Elementary. And part of that is a lot of this, I built homes in Farmington where the kids get transported down by their parents to Reading because of school population problems. When we introduce these 60 homes, that will probably bring into the school there roughly another, I don't know how many, but probably another 60 to 80 students. And as that school is already at capacity, the district's going to have to shunt some of those students probably to other schools. And now instead of having people driving in the community to drop off their kids, we're going to have more of a walkable neighborhood school that Reading was intended to be. And we plan to put a connection from the road we put into the north of the school, a walkway path through the school to allow the kids just to walk and come through the playground to the school. We hope, it wasn't just kind of a happy circumstance, but we hope that actually our development will decrease the number of cars coming to that school rather than increase it. And there may be other questions, but we ask for your approval for this zoning. We think we can do a wonderful project there that will serve the city well.
Thank you, Bruce. Questions for Bruce right now? From the council? I'm sure there'll be more.
Well, I'm happy to come up and answer any questions. I may not have answers, but I'll do my best.
Thank you, Bruce. So like I said, this is a public hearing matter, so I will now open the public hearing related to the DeVore property rezone from agricultural low to residential low. Anybody that is inclined to comment, come to either one of these microphones and state your name and where you're from. We would appreciate that for the record. So the public hearing is now open.
Ivan Cutler. I live on the north end of Centerville. Our property actually would be right up against this development. First, I'd like to say to Jack, Keith, and Dean, and other of Mabel's children that are here, we loved your mother, and we've loved having you, Keith, especially as a neighbor. The DeVore family and the Cutler family will forever be intertwined. I have some initial thoughts about this development coming in. We all realize that change is inevitable. There's nothing we can do about change. That's the one constant in all of our lives. However, what we can do is we can stand and voice our opinions about properties that have been built in the past to help dictate what goes on in the future. Safe to say most of us are not very happy with the way Woods Park came about, the subdivision that is kind of on the north end of Centerville that doesn't really fit in with anything else on the north end of Centerville. And that's one of the biggest concerns that property owners up there, especially myself, have, is that Symphony will come in and say, yes, we're going to build 60 homes. Next thing we know, what was termed residential low is now suddenly 120 homes. There's many fears of that right now with those homes in Woods Park. The fact that we still have yet to see any resolution to the drainage issues that are caused by that. And Brant, forgive me for saying this, but Woods Park dropped the ball, Centerville dropped the ball, and there are two property owners who still to this day have drainage issues. One of which I have actually physically been there in a rainstorm and watched water come over the berm that was supposed to catch all of the water into one property owner's yard and create a pool of water. So drainage is a huge concern for many property owners over there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan.
I'm Craig Salmon again. I live just south of this property, and I have two concerns. One, and maybe just clarification. If it's zoned for residential, what is the lot size requirement on that? Is there none? And two is in this traffic study, if they took in consideration what it is now, and what it will probably be, but isn't there an off-ramp coming off this freeway that's going to hit the frontage road and an overpass that goes over the freeway that extends to the west corridor or whatever they call it, the highway, which is the legacy, was legacy, and I wonder if that has been taken into consideration, because that's going to affect that whole thing down there on the frontage road. I would think. I haven't seen the picture, but I've heard about it, and I've talked to Randy a little bit, but I'm sure maybe you guys know about that. That's my questions.
Yes, there is West Davis Highway coming in. That's going to be right there by the Woodside Homes. Woods Park. Wood Park. So yes, that is coming in. McKinsey, do you want to address his question on lot size?
So residential low does not have a minimum lot size, but it's a gross density zone. So there's only 4 units allowed in an acre. So roughly a 1/4 acre per lot.
Thank you for coming, Scouts. Thanks, McKinsey. Did we answer both your questions, Craig?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, one, because the freeway.
Jump up there,
jump up
just
to
so
the
we
mic.
have you.
I'm not sure, is that freeway gonna go onto the frontage road? The off-ramp there, and then is it gonna make that not part of the frontage road anymore? Does anybody know that? I mean, and then there's traffic that won't be able to pass on that frontage road, it'll have to be rerouted another way, or? Because I've heard that it comes off, it goes there right in front of the Woodside Homes, and then an overpass that goes over the freeway to head out to the west.
It won't cut off the frontage road. We will have our frontage road, but it will come off by the frontage road, and then it will fly over top of it.
So it won't impede that
it
frontage
will
road
not
traffic.
impede the frontage road, but it will move the frontage road over towards the homes in some areas.
I see.
However, please understand that it hasn't been designed yet. That's very preliminary.
So we want to keep this going with responses, and we'll start addressing questions as well too. So
It's all deciding.
let's continue.
Hello. Hello. My name is Cole Smith. I am on 400 West, just before it dead ends on the north end at 2101 North. Property owner in Lexington Park, obviously. So since I had the opportunity to address the Planning and Zoning Commission just over a month ago, did want to dispute a little bit with Mr. Robinson's assertion of 60 homes and 60 kids going to reading. It'll be more than that. I've also been collecting a little bit of data in the last month. Currently, on the intersection of 2025 North and 400 West, on any given day, in the morning and in the afternoon, when parents are dropping kids off and coming to pick them up, a minimum on an average school day of at least 54 cars parked on 2025, ranging between Frontage Road up to Main Street, and also on 400 West, between my house roughly at 2101 North, proceeding almost to 1950 North on a given day. It is very tough for, I think the data would clearly support people trying to make a left-hand turn on to 400 West or continuing east or west on 2025 is problematic. My perspective is if the council is going to consider approving the change from AL to RL, as a parent of a first grader and also being president of the Reading Advisory Council, I would absolutely petition that a full-time crossing guard be stationed at 2025 and 400 West if this is going to be considered. And minimally, similar to your street, Mayor, at 400 West and Jennings Lane, the flashing stop signs that indicate that people have to stop. It is a safety concern now, and adding 60 additional homes, it is unacceptable to not have a crossing guard there. So if this is going to be considered, I ask that. Appreciate, again, Bruce's comments on the drainage and at least some realization that those of us who live in Lexington Park, that the drainage is a disaster, and that hard to take at face value that that's going to be fixed. Many of us have incurred many thousands of dollars of expense trying to get that fixed, including adding sump pumps. So again, I would ask the council if this is going to be approved that there be a more concrete plan, because hard to take at face value based on empty promises in the past. Thank you.
Thanks, Cole. Further?
I am Allison Garlick. I live at 2164 North Frontage Road, just south of the Woods Park subdivision. I want to thank Symphony Homes for their comments, particularly addressing the drainage. Woods Park has severe drainage issues. I know that it's been stated earlier that they're taking care of that, but it has not. And so that is a huge concern with 60 houses going in as to whether or not the infrastructure is going to be able to handle that drainage with that many houses going in, as well as the safety. I know from personal experience, the safety issue of 2025 North. It is a problem, and on any given day, there are cars speeding down that road, and adding 60 houses to that property has me very concerned about the safety of the children in that subdivision. And so that is a huge concern that I have. The other concern that I have, and I disagree of changing this zoning from agricultural low to residential low, mainly because of the diversity in our city. Coming from the area of an agricultural low area and have greatly enjoyed it for the last 20 years, has been huge, not only for my family's development, but also for the surrounding communities. Working with Reading Elementary and as well as several other elementaries, not only here in Centerville, but in Bountiful, having agricultural property within our city is important. I realize and concede that our general master plan is that our communities stay residential low, and that this property would fit in well with Lexington Park and the surrounding area. But you also need to consider that north end with it being agriculture low and the importance of having agriculture in our cities. I understand that there may be other properties that are agricultural right now, but if we continue to lose that, we're going to lose really great benefits for the most important commodity that we have, and that's our youth and children. And so I
would strongly suggest recommending and considering the zoning change.
Thank you, Allison. Further?
Sorry, Sharon. My name's Heather Healy. I currently live on 2025 North. And my parents, Britt and Cindy Garlick, live at 2164 North Frontage Road, which is where I grew up. I am concerned about putting 60 homes. Like's been stated, it is a serious safety hazard. On March 15th, my daughter was hit by a car on that road. I'm concerned that putting 60 houses and adding that many more vehicles going up and down that street is just another accident waiting to happen. People do not obey the speed limit on that road. They do not pay attention to people on that road. I can't tell you how many times I walk out of my front door and I want to throw a garbage can at somebody's window because they're going too fast. So I am seriously concerned about the safety issue as to where the roads are going to come in and out. I also am concerned with rezoning it because, like has been stated, like Ivan stated earlier, we originally rezoned the Woods Park subdivision to a residential low, and now we have a high-density housing situation in that area. And so what's to stop it from, as soon as we get that rezone done, from Symphony Homes going in and saying, well, we've decided we want to do something different. And I understand that, once again, the subdivision will have to be approved by the city council and all of that, but I am concerned with changing that. I also, having the agricultural in the diversity of having some agricultural land still in Centerville, I think is super important. As my husband and I have looked to move over the years, trying to find a little piece of agricultural land in Centerville is impossible because the people that have it don't want to give it up. And while I understand that agricultural land is not for everyone, and someone may want to come in and just put in a big, beautiful yard, that's fantastic. But there are some people that would like to have a horse, have a couple of goats, that would like to raise their children in such a fashion that they would take advantage of that agricultural area. So I would recommend that we leave it as agricultural low and allow our city to still have some diversity in it.
Thanks, Heather.
I'm Sharon Cutler. I live on Main Street, just north of this proposed development. And I just was sitting here after Mr. Robinson talked about how he thought maybe there would be less cars in the area because the children would be walking to school. I just really want to make this point clear. If they are $1 million homes and $500,000 homes, there is not like one car to every home. There will be 3, maybe 4 cars at every home because that's the lifestyle of that house. So you're adding 120 at least, but more likely 200 to 250 cars to this little area. And the existing roads, Heather, I think, gave a very good explanation of what she sees every day. And we haven't seen the subdivision, but if there's not an access from the frontage road or the main street, you're putting 250 extra cars on the roads that are going right past that elementary school in the morning when people are going to work. And I think that's a very serious consideration that you need to think about. And the subdivision, the development, there should be other access roads to the main roads.
Thank you, Sharon.
My name is Cindy Garlick. First of all, I apologize for being late. I had another obligation. But living on that northwest quadrant of the city, we have enjoyed the fact that there is some rural aspect to our community. And it just breaks my heart to think that we're going to put 60 houses in there and remove any sense of rural that we have in our community. I realize that a half-acre building lot is not a large piece of property, but it still allows for a child to raise a lamb or a goat and sell it at the county fair. It still allows a child to have a horse and be able to participate in high school rodeo or 4-H equine projects. It still allows them to raise chickens. It still allows them to do so many things that they are limited to do if they are on a really small parcel. The other thing that I really worry about is the drainage. It is a soggy piece of land, and I think by compacting it with so many houses that will increase the probability of drainage issues. And while it may be not overly significant, I think it's significant enough that that we need to think about that before we do it. I realize that for the developer, we're asking him to sacrifice a large amount of income, but I think as a citizen, we have the right to speak to how we want our community developed. And to place half-acre lots there with still $500,000 to $1 million homes allows for somebody who has a small family to come in and enjoy that space. It allows for somebody who can afford to have $1 million home to come in and build a pool or a beautiful, well-groomed yard. I think that it allows for a lot more socioeconomic diversity if we leave it as agricultural low and then allow the residents of that small parcel to do what they want done in their community rather than us dictating what is going to have there.
Thank you, Cindy.
Hi, my name is Brooke Holman. I was actually here beforehand at a tree board meeting with his council, and that's originally why I was going to stand today, but I actually have two other cautionary points to make as well. But my first point was I asked the tree board or the city council this meeting in discussing park strip width is why when we have developers we're not asking them to make park strips wider on our streets. As a tree board, we've been discussing park strip trees. I bet most of you didn't even know we had a tree board in Centerville. But it's a question that I did pose to the city council at the end, like why aren't we requiring developers when they come in and do a project to beautify our city a little bit? And one way as a tree board we've discovered in looking at other communities, it's wider park strips. And so that was my point that I was going to make. But for the rest of you, I live in Centerville. I'm on 1900 North east of Main Street. I'm also on community council with Cole. He did a great job representing the issues we've talked about at Reading Elementary regarding traffic and the concerns that a lot of parents have along that road that have been mentioned by a few parents here tonight. But I have built two homes, my husband and I have, in Farmington. We built one with Mr. Robinson in Symphony Homes. We were down Continental Drive in Farmington, and to speak to the drainage issues, there were drainage issues in that neighborhood. We sold our home after 5 years, but many of our neighbors in that home had problems with drainage, had sinking homes, and were left with no recourse. The company who had done the soils report had gone out of business, and we moved away for 2 years, came back. We built in an adjacent property to Symphony's Homes development. Our builder was Elite Craft Homes, and we built our second home there. And in that development, we built in 2007, right at the peak of the housing, and then soon after, we had a housing crash here. And what happened was the original plan that Elite Craft had with Farmington City was bigger lots, bigger homes, but once the economy crashed, there was no way they were ever going to be able to sell that property. And what they ended up having to do was resubmit a plan to City Council with smaller patio-sized homes, smaller, higher density, and it completely changed what we were one of the very first homeowners to build, and it completely changed the neighborhood. So the cautionary tale here, I guess, is to keep in mind some of these outlying factors when you're doing such a large project, 60 homes. I don't know how it's phased, but keeping in mind some of these factors and how it can impact the drainage issues. You may be planning for 60 now. I don't know the timeline of how this development goes, but it always takes longer. And I know Elite Craft Homes had that issue, and their timing with their development went into a recession, and it extended even further. And as a result, I know a lot of people in there had issues with drainage because the original drainage that was put in when the project started was built for a different amount of people that ended up building there. So that's my comments.
Thank you, Brooke.
Hello, my name's Lisa Robinson, and we live on 1950 North, so it would just be south of that map there, 2 streets. And I think as I'm listening, what I keep hearing about is compatibility. And although it be compatible with the Lexington Park, it is clearly not compatible with anything else around it, because clear back to my street, a few streets over, we're all on half acres, agricultural land. So the agricultural land is not just that little corner north of this, but even south of this, all those homes are half-acre lots with agricultural. So when you're looking at the compatibility, I think you're looking at compatible with one, but not compatible with many others. And I know when we were here a few years ago and spoke about the Lund Lane proposal, talked about maybe preserving some of this land for agriculture, and here we are a few years later looking at it and thinking, yeah, remember? Let's make it that way, because I think what you're failing to see is the whole picture of how uncompatible it is with everything that even extends further. So I hope you'll consider that and look at what kind of uncompatible island you're creating by developing all this land. So that's my input. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
My name's Abe Millett. We live on the northwest corner of that property there, so just adjacent to the DeVore property. We have 2 very specific concerns that are kind of subcategories of those expressed. The first is access to our home. We currently access from Frontage Road. When we developed the property, that was one of the concerns that was brought to us from the city. We didn't think too much of it. Ultimately, there was no alternative, and so we enter from Frontage Road. That's proven to be a bit of an issue, that we've had near misses with pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles. With the increased traffic that this would bring, that just creates even more of a concern for us. For example, you have a blockage on the front of the freeway. A lot of cars are diverted to the frontage road. If you're not familiar and knowing that there is just 2 driveways is all I know about on frontage road, you're not expecting someone to slow down and exit from frontage road, and there's a real possibility of an issue. So that's our first concern. The second concern is, so I guess what we're saying is we need to find some way to correct that issue during this development, find some way to enter other than frontage road through this development. The second is the transition between the agricultural and potentially residential. That it's a whole airport scenario. People move in, they recognize there's an airport there, but then they start complaining about the noise. And we have animals, and sometimes they don't smell as great, and as some might like, and they have flies and whatever else. It's just part of the nature of having animals, and that is an issue that we'd like to have addressed somehow if we're considering this proposal.
Thank you, Abe.
It's my turn. Lisa Fowers, and I live at the very end of 400, so you see the red square there. I'm in the corner where would be affected by the drainage of the east homes, and we have major water problems now. And as I understand from Ralph Cutler, everything runs down, and we already have problems, and so I definitely think the drainage needs to be addressed. It wouldn't go down to Main Street. It would go into my yard. We already have a ditch taking the water out. We've got several ditches, and yeah, it's a problem. And that's not on our property. That's on the Symphony property. Our property has drains. And I heard somebody say after the last meeting that half-acre lots, so I don't know if this is like been a thing for sure, substantiated, but half-acre lots, there's there would be less concrete for the water to run off and more drainage area. So half-acre lots would be another thing to consider if it would help with the drainage, having the bigger lots. And then with the traffic, I think you could talk to the police department because is it Chief Childs, I think? They've been there like a lot of days in the beginning of the year. There was a police officer there to help the kids cross. And yeah, they've been there like all the time. And everybody on that street knows that just to avoid that, you cannot get through that intersection. You might hit a child, which would be horrible, but you just can't. There's so many cars and so many kids, you can't get through. You just know to avoid it. You know what time school gets out. And I don't have any kids that go to that school anymore, but you know to avoid it. Anyway, so my request would be, yeah, to do it, leave some agricultural. We really like having the diversity in the animals and the field trips that go through with the kids to see the animals, and yeah. So that's my recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa.
My name is Mia Cutler. We own the property just north of there. As my son talked about the divorce, kind of brought tears to my eyes. We love the DeVore family. We love Mabel. And I understand them wanting to sell the property and to develop. But for us, it's really difficult to do that. That whole area has been agricultural for years and years and years. We fought the Woods Park subdivision. We were promised other things, and now it's an island there by itself. Allowing this property to be developed, you're creating an island for us that are already there, because you're allowing all of these little subdivisions or bigger subdivisions going around us. Like Lisa said, clear from 1950 on up are half-acre lots. There have been many issues brought up. We own property right next to the Millets, and that whole area right there is a pool. You can have an ice skating rink there if you want, because there is always water there. Always. Because of all of the property that's being subdivided, we now have an animal park in our pasture. Anywhere from 15 deer on up. You're welcome to come and shoot a deer. They talked about traffic. Well, we live on a dead-end street, 2150 North, and we have cars come barreling down that street because they think it is a through street. And when they get to the turnaround, they are so angry, and they flip around and they zip right back up to Main Street. And there are children that live on that street. I have a lot of concerns about this many homes going in. Sometimes I feel, why do we have these public meetings where we can express our concerns? Many times I feel like we're not listened to. I appreciate the support that we had the last time with the Lund Lane subdivision. I'm hoping that you will listen to our concerns again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mia. Do we have any others?
My name's Steve Meyer. I live in Bountiful, but I'm one of the trustees for the Mabel DeVore Family Trust. Some of the family is here. Raise your hand. Well represented. When you have a DeVore meeting, you have a lot of people show up. Mabel and Ernest purchased that property in the early 1950s, and they raised about half of their 16 children there on that place. And you need a lot of land when you have 16 kids. So hear stories about them throwing rocks at the Bamberger trains as it went by as they were trying to move the cows back up to the farm. Our job as trustees is to work to optimize the value of this property for the benefit of the beneficiaries of the trust. And we've tried to do that with respect. You know, we looked for somebody to develop the property who would respect what the city's desires were, what the master plan said. And we selected to work with Symphony, and we've entered into a purchase agreement with them. They also had that additional property that's shown, not just our property. And it just made sense to get to put those two properties together to make a contiguous development and be able to develop the property properly and address a lot of these issues consistently from east to west. Otherwise, we would have been trapped with I think a 70-foot little strip between the two properties. I think you heard in the previous issue that you had a public hearing on tonight, the issue with respect to the master planning process. Well, we've gone through the master planning process over the years for this property, and it was determined that the RL zoning is the appropriate zone here, and that the public had the opportunity to comment on that, and that zoning has been approved and or in the master plan so that development can go on. That is so this property, this project is proposed, this rezone is compatible with the land use master plans. I believe that you have a great city staff who can address the issues that the neighbors are concerned about. Now, we probably could roll the tape back, the videotape, or probably 35 millimeter film back when some of these others were developed. We would have had the same issues from other property owners. Lexington Hills is going to generate so much traffic that it's going to destroy our existing neighborhoods. Those are always the issues, but as you look as this area develops and the street master plan that the city's come up with, I think it adequately addresses the traffic concerns and distributes it to the frontage roads, to Main Street, and gets some of that commuter traffic out of the neighborhood streets. I think your city staff is very diligent in looking out for the needs of the city. My prior work was with UTA and building the Front Runner commuter rail system, and coming through Centerville, we spent a lot of time with Centerville making sure that they were looking out for the concerns of the drainage from east to west under the railroad corridor, and they were looking out for the interest of the community. So I think, again, similar to the previous item, you're consistent with your master plan. You've got a good developer here who understands what the issues are in this area. The development is consistent with what's going on, and I would recommend approval of the zoning change. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Jen Bangeter. I live on 2025 North, right across the street from Reading Elementary. I appreciate the comments that were just made, but it's easy to make comments like that when you don't know what is happening in your community. And I see firsthand what is happening on that street. I have children that have to cross that street to go to school there. And a lot of days, suck in my breath hoping they make it across the street because there are so many cars. And to Sharon Cutler's point, you're going to add even more cars to the streets if you change the zoning. And by changing the zoning, we're allowing these big subdivisions to come in and choose what our community looks like and the feel of our community. Why do we want to allow that? Why do we want to let somebody that doesn't live in our community to come in and change it and dictate what happens? We live in our community. We know what our community looks like and feels like. So let's keep our community in our control and not the big builders' control. And I feel that by changing the zoning, you're allowing exactly that, the builder to choose what our community looks like and feels like. So my recommendation is to not change the zoning.
Thanks, Jen. Anyone else?
My name is Shanna McBride. I live right on 2025 and 400. I don't know a lot about all the information that's gone on. I wasn't informed about it until just before this started, so I even came late when I heard about it. I did want to say, in observing what's going on, I see two things happening. I see one where it's an opportunity for growth and a business opportunity, and I also see a lot of history and a lot of families here that have been here for generations that feel deeply in their soul about the property that they live around. They feel a familial feeling with everybody around them, and I feel like one's an emotional concern and one's a literal water concern of that I've heard, and a safety concern. Living on 2025, I want to add my voice that it is a dangerous street by the elementary. I know that nobody in this room wants a child hurt, but there have been children hurt. Very bad. So whatever happens with the vote, my voice is going to be added to not add the 60, even if you could maybe lessen it. And if you do that, feel the responsibility of what that does to that area and to the children, and put in a light, have some guards there, and maybe a speed bump or two. Because I'm telling you, 25 is not respected. 25 miles an hour is not respected at any time in my dead-end street and from Main Street all the way to Parish Lane. It's never respected. From UPS to teenagers to just people just driving around, I just don't feel like they recognize how fast they're actually going. And it is a dangerous place. My little boy is in kindergarten, and I physically walk there every day because I don't want him to be by himself, and he doesn't have to cross the street. He can stay on the sidewalk, but they drive so fast that I feel like I physically have to be there in case someone is speeding and has to veer out of the way or something. So even if you consider the width of the road that they're driving on, they're super tight. People are gridlocked both ways, and people are parked on both sides, all the way from my road, all the way up to Main Street. And so for me, listening to having a conservative number of cars added to the traffic is honestly conservative. You know, and I know that there are probably 3 and 4 kids that will be coming in per home, and added vehicles. And so please, if we don't get the vote no on the 60 homes, consider your responsibility to take care of that area with the traffic. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon. Anyone else? All right, if no one else, then I will close the public hearing, and we will, yes, that's next on the agenda, the applicant response to public comment. It's your floor.
We'll make this brief. You've probably seen my sister at meetings here who pretty much doesn't want any growth in Centerville. And I understand that. I mean, I was raised up here. One thing that's hard to remember is I used to pheasant hunt after school for years down west of Main Street. And one by one, I can name the family, the Smoots, the Rigbys, et cetera, sold their land. And housing tracts went in. Most of you live on land where I pheasant hunted. And trust me, when I was younger, I would have liked to have seen it stay farm and for pheasants forever. But it's difficult. And I know this is an emotional issue, but I'm also sensitive to the DeVore family. The fact that they've held on to their land, I hope, doesn't penalize them in relation to all the other families that had farms down there that sold and developed, on which most of you now have your homes, that somehow they don't get penalized or have to feel the guilt of wanting to develop their land just because they're later. Because I can name all the families who have done this over the last decades and have been one that benefited from all that open space for years, but it ended up getting developed, and it seems to be the natural ways work. Yet I am sensitive. I know how hard it is. When anything changes, the impact is difficult. We are sensitive to the traffic, and all I can say to that is that we have had a traffic study done. We're happy to give it to you. I get the concerns on 2025 North. I think the traffic study addresses our development and the minimal impact it'll have on 2025 North. It addresses where the cars will exit and stuff. And you're welcome to have that. But again, if we put even one house there, it will add a couple of cars. But I think the impact is minimal when you talk to an expert, and the report addresses that. We're sorry about the school crowding issue. Those might be issues better raised with the school district and where they shunt children to and bring them in from. And we're happy to help with that. But we do believe that this development can come together in a way where there will be impacts. I'm not naive. When you build new houses, there are impacts. We think they'll be minimal. We think it can be a beautiful community. I know there's concern that somehow this will grow from 60 homes to 120. I honestly don't know how that happens unless the city gives permission for that. And we don't build multifamily. We don't build duplexes. We never have. We build upper-end single-family housing. Our average sales price is $900,000. These will be some of the least expensive homes we build. We just don't build entry-level housing, and I don't know what to say about that other than we have no intentions to put some kind of multifamily project down here. And I think the zoning will make sure that doesn't happen. We're suggesting we build about 3.5 units per acre, I think the zoning allows for. But we hope you'll consider this. We think it's the natural course of development in this area. We are, again, apologize and know that it's emotional and it's difficult, and we'll do what we can to try to minimize the impacts and make sure it's a properly done development. But we would encourage you to allow the DeVore family to develop this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay, so council, it's now your opportunity. Any questions for staff or applicant?
I'm going to
responses?
I'm going to have some questions for staff. Mackenzie, this will be for you. I just want to make a general statement to the public. I appreciate that you're here. These public hearings are really tough because you say your piece, then it's closed, then there's a response, and then the council deliberates. And I've sat exactly where you're sitting, and it is a very frustrating process to basically not be able to respond. Please be aware that everyone on this council is mindful of that. Most of us have sat down where you are as just like you. So we will be as careful as we can in getting to all these issues. And I think that from my perspective at least, I feel that tension tonight that you're going to feel that you're going to be shut down. One thing it's either going to be Bill or me or Robin. I don't know who's going to race to it, but there likely won't be a decision on this tonight because there are issues like this traffic study. I've never seen it. So I'm going to ask that staff take that traffic study and please put it past Kevin Campbell, our city engineer, and give us a little bit more detail. So don't worry, there's not a shutdown happening tonight. So on that, let me ask you.
One second, before you ask that question, Councilman. we're all taking notes up here and all mindful of what you're saying. Part of this process, and it can be a frustrating process, and I tried to start responding to people, but that's not really part of the process. I'm kind of out of order when I do that, but that's what I do, and I have to be reminded sometimes. So we listen, we take notes, we deliberate, and so we are listening. This is how the process is laid out, and that's how we follow it. But I saw everyone who's taking notes, either on their computer or paper, of your thoughts and concerns. Thank you.
So, and some of this, the questions I'm going to ask are, I already know the answer, but I think this is for the benefit of those gathered here tonight. Can you just briefly go through the process of a rezone versus a subdivision platting? And the crux of my question is, do we have any right as the city council to consider who the developer is and what they're going to do when we're talking about a rezone?
To answer, okay, there's
a
multiple
multi-part question, sorry,
questions
yeah.
in there. So for the rezone, it's those 4 questions that we have to address. Is it compatible? Is there infrastructure? What's the transition? So that's what's required at a rezone. It goes public hearing, planning commission, public hearing, city council. It can always be pushed back to planning commission and go multiple times if needed.
So to force you to actually answer George's question, no.
Correct. Which of the questions?
So the question of,
Doesn't matter who the
does it
developer
matter who
is.
who the builder is
No.
in a rezone?
If they meet those, if we can answer to your satisfaction those 4 questions, it doesn't matter who the developer is.
Okay.
Do you want me to still answer the
Keep
subdivision
going.
question?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
So subdivision have multiple processes. There is a conceptual subdivision, staff reviews that and then brings that to planning commission. And that's where most of these items get addressed. Drainage, soils, traffic, infrastructure, the roads, the sewers, the water lines, the zoning, setbacks, all those things get addressed at that conceptual. That goes before the planning commission. Planning commission reviews it, usually has items that they want changed and fixed, or suggestions to make it meet the general plan. So then the applicant goes back, does that again, goes to preliminary, goes back to planning commission, and Lisa, you could probably help me. Does preliminary go to city council or just final? Okay, so from there, more changes happen. I'm facing you guys, even though I'm supposed to be talking to them. And then final subdivision, more items are addressed, and there are public hearings along the way, from conceptual to final. If the planning commission approves that final subdivision, then it comes to city council. There's another public hearing, more time for public input, and then you can approve or deny that subdivision application at the time.
I appreciate that. It was a great answer, and to clarify why I was asking for that, and as well as, again, I'm thinking, sitting right down there in the audience as I have on many occasions, sometimes it looks like it's a one decision and then it's over. You've lost or you've won on one decision. If we proceed in this process and decide to go from AL to RL, there are many other points of clarification and drive that can still happen on the project.
That's correct.
Okay.
I will make the point, though, that there's a clear distinction that tonight's our legislative decision. And when Mackenzie just said at final subdivision, we can approve or deny, at that point, it's an administrative decision. And it's just a checklist to make sure that the boxes are checked and that they're meeting ordinance. And if they are, then we have to say yes. So.
Right, but what I'm
Just
trying
be
to
clear.
indicate is that, and this is always I'm really thinking about everyone who's sitting here tonight is that if we proceed down this road, there are other points of input that are still, because what always bothered me when I was involved in this on the other side of the dais is that a council would pick a direction, whether it was logical or not, that's not even up for debate at this point. They pick a direction, and then as the public, you felt like you're done at that point and you have no more input and you should just shut up and go home. And I don't want anyone to go away with that, because we're going to have deliberation that maybe some people are cheering and some people are scowling as we have that debate. And I just want to make sure that we don't shut people down unnecessarily in this process.
I'm going to step in right here because I watched the Planning Commission meeting clear through, because I like to know what's coming before you guys get here. So I watched that, and one of the frustrating things, because I was known as the clamor that sat out there in those chairs all by myself a lot of times. Over the last 20 years, some of them times Stephanie was sitting there next to me, but we were where you are, and I know exactly how you're feeling. But I do think we do need to realize something that I learned along the way is, yes, right now we are not approving a subdivision, we're just doing a rezone. But if you give them the rezone and they can mitigate any of the problems that these people have said, then we cannot deny the subdivision. So we can, at this point, we still have a right to say, you know, is traffic a problem? Is this a problem? Is that a problem? But once we have said, no, we think all those things can be mitigated, which we may do, but we need to know that then they have the right to build, they just have to mitigate. So we really don't want to approve this unless we're sure that all of those things can be mitigated to what would be best for our city.
Mayor, if I may just put a check mark of caution in that statement there. That is
Sure.
true. The cautionary tale is, though, is that it's currently eligible for subdivision approval under the ag zoning. It would be a different number of lots, so I would recognize a different number of lots. But the issues of drainage, the issues of additional traffic, the issues that are associated with loss of agricultural, depending on what you view that loss of agriculture, because half-acre subdivisions do not necessarily equate to the raising of animals, although there's some rights might be preserved. But if you think of half-acre lots, you're going to have 50 points. One horse is 50 points. And a half-acre, from my position, is not adequate to really for horse. So now you're looking at the smaller animals. So there's some limitations on the use of animals. And so there will still be the tension. It'll just be the number of lots that are debated in that tension.
Would the drainage be easier to take care of with less homes? Or is that not necessarily true?
Because you're going to still have the standard roads. You're just delivering to a lesser amount of lots to those roads. But those roads will be the same size and generate the same amount of storm runoff. You do recognize that the houses at a quarter acre or half acre, depending on the sizes, will probably be close to 6s on the amount of impervious surfaces that you occur with the rooftops, the driveways, the pools, the patios, the decks, and all of those will still contribute to the drainage problem. You gain a little bit of advantage of a larger lot because you're hoping that the larger lot has a little bit more pervious area that the water can drain into the ground. The difficulty I see with this area is whether it's a half-acre lot or a quarter-acre lot, that west half of the property, there's already a high groundwater. So you're not going to get a lot of permeation of water into it. And if anything, you're capturing less into the storm drain system and more of it's going into the higher groundwater. How much? Subtle differences, but probably not that significant of a difference. So I just want you to know that whether it's a half-acre lot or quarter-acre lots, the debate will be how many additional homes with the number of parking and cars. You know, that would add, that would change that and increase that. But you're going to still have to deal with the road systems. You still have to deal with the drainage systems. You're going to still have to deal with additional homes and additional traffic. The question is to what extent. So either way, you're in the same position. I just want you to be aware of that.
So, Robin, tied to your point is the question of making the decision knowing that we'd have to be okay with the end result. And it's always an interesting part of the job to balance the known with the unknown. And the issues that we would deal with the known versus if we say no to a known proposition, because we're worried about the issues. We don't know what change will come in the future because something will come in the future. And something that I like about this situation is it's always beneficial when there's a larger piece of land that's getting planned and subdivided at the same time, because the drainage issues and all these other things that have been brought up, the problem level of those get multiplied exponentially when you're breaking things up piecemeal. And so then you don't have an entire system to take care of that. So something that I appreciate as a developer, taking the time and the patience to collect a larger piece of land so that they can tackle that issue in a more organized way that will be more effective.
Tammy, I agree that it's tricky trying to balance the known with the unknown. One of the things that we've talked about in the last couple of weeks, and most of you weren't here to see it, but the state is putting increasing pressure on cities to provide additional housing. And not just increasing pressure, but saying that funding from the state is tied to our compliance with that. And as we look at what the state goals are, I don't think they're the same as your goals. In fact, I could tell you that they're absolutely not. But we are more vulnerable to the state taking land use options away from us and forcing us to do what they want when we have large tracts of land that are undeveloped. They're not likely to say, you have to tear down this subdivision and put in multifamily housing. And I know that 60 homes sounds like a ton to you, a ton, because there are no homes there right now. But 300 homes on that same space would be a much bigger impact. And that is really the direction that the state is pushing, right here along the Wasatch Front. So as I am, it makes me want to cry to have any agricultural land be taken away. But I live on just under a quarter of an acre because I don't have the luxury of being able to live in the north end of town. And the south end of town doesn't have big half-acre lots, most of them. But I do have chickens. There is still a little bit of trying to have that agricultural feeling, but sometimes I think it's better for us to take the known that's a little hard to swallow than to leave ourselves vulnerable for the really bad that could come later.
Well, and that's kind of where Tammy and I agree on that with the known versus the unknown. Even if we said absolutely no way this stays agricultural, 4 years from now, that could completely change. That could be, I'm not going to use the word necessarily hostile to the community, but more open to higher density options. I look at areas like 400 South in Salt Lake, building to the point where you can't even see the mountains anymore. We do know that we have an inland port coming that's going to bring 11,000 jobs and the subsidiary families who will want to live in the immediate Wasatch Front. So what do? Do you potentially preempt the state and take care of the problem by having a low-density development? And we've talked about this as a council before. When we talked about the Dix property, we were patting ourselves on the back that we created a low-density development that solved the problem in that area. Because it's at the lower density. We've lowered the density as a council from what other communities consider low to, I would consider, very low. So, you know, it's bird in hand sort of situation, recognizing that, yeah, it does potentially change the character of the area. The traffic concerns, we'll take a look at the study and some of those, but I am concerned about what the future holds 4 years from now, whether that's a community-led decision through a council, or if that is a straight pressuring to change land use policy. And if that's not the boogeyman in the closet that hasn't been recognized, Salt Lake just had a bunch of land yanked out from under them and said, congratulations, you've got an inland port. And that was a state move. And the city just sat there and said, you can't. And they categorically proved that cities are an extension of the state and all legislative powers are delegated from the state. So they can make that kind of option. Now, is it likely in Centerville in the next 5 to 10 years? I don't know. I can guarantee you as I-15 widens and the West Davis corridor continues to progress, that real estate in Centerville, one of the last places you can still get to downtown in a reasonable amount of time, those property values are going to go up. And if I am a millennial saying I'd really like to live in Centerville, but there are no single resident options available to me or high density options, I'd be campaigning my state legislature to force the hand of a city that won't cooperate. But as you said, Stephanie, if there's something already there, it's really hard to change that.
So the council has a very tough decision on this, as you can see. One thing that we all need to know as residents is that in some of our decisions we make, there's hiddens that aren't hidden but are out there, such as whatever the council decides, they can't make a decision based on the number of students that are going to be added to Reading Elementary. That's illegal. That's against the law. Okay, I mean that might weigh in their minds, but that's up for the cities or the school district to decide. So there's little things like that as residents you need to be aware of. I mean, they'll get concerned about traffic flow and all that. We're all concerned about our children, but there's little things like that as residents, we need to understand that until you're really involved in the process. I mean, I didn't even understand that. You can't. That's just an example of that cannot weigh in their minds because that's up to the school district to decide. So I just bring things up like that because they'll probably explain their decision wherever they go. But there's those issues that's just one of so many they have to consider. So further responses?
I did want to talk about the crossing guard situation. It's horrible over there. It really is. And I know that's one that the chief has been concerned about and continues to be concerned about. We are going to be starting our budget cycle again, and it does cost to have a crossing guard, and we have to have willing people to have crossing guards. And I know sometimes it's hard to get subs even for the crossing guards we already have. And maybe 2 would be more useful than 1 where you live, but you are an area that we are really, really, really concerned about with the crossing of the children for school. I don't know. We're also not allowed to look at what their plans are of here's the design of the subdivision we want and make our zoning decision based on that. So I haven't seen what Mr. Robinson mentioned, but he did say something about a little place where the children could walk. So I have no concept other than just what I come up with in my head to equate to that. But I do know that it's a serious problem, and it is something that we're trying as a city to be responsive and to juggle our funds and respond to that in a safe way.
And I will second that with Stephanie. I have talked to the police chief several times. Any of you that don't know me, I am a crossing guard. I'm much more proud of that than city council person. And you really do have a very big issue over there, and you have a police department that's very concerned about it. And we are trying hard to maybe get some crossing guards over there. So whether this property comes or not, I want you to know that the city is very concerned about your children over there and trying to get crossing guards. And there's not a bigger advocate for crossing guards than me, but please slow down and quit running over top of us. I will put that plug in as I dodge the cars every morning. And so, part of the problem is the drivers, and so.
Is there further questions for staff or applicant before I entertain a motion?
I was going to make an editorial comment, but I think I'm going to pass. There's been plenty of them. I would like to propose that we table this at least for 2 weeks to give me time, others time to consider the things that have been made.
Would you consider adding to your motion to continue to accept public comment by email for the public record?
Yes, and I would, that we would accept additional public comment by email through a week from Friday to give us time to digest it before the meeting.
And
I'll second.
I'll definitely second that. Either one. Go for it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion on that motion?
It's our standard procedure that we don't vote on something that has issues without us going home and looking at it ourselves and really weighing the impact of what we've heard.
And that gives you that chance, if you thought of something on the way home, to still let us know, rather than walking away with no additional input.
Mr. Mayor, if that would be December 13th, can we put a time on that to allow us to include it in the packet?
For the emails? Yeah, because we have to notice our meetings, and we try and get those out on Friday afternoon. So for staff purposes, you'd probably like to have those comments in by.
If we can get it by noon, that'd be great.
I was going to say noon. Okay, I was going to say 9 o'clock, but noon. Then on Friday, up till Friday the 13th.
Additionally, Mayor, for that agenda, if you request that the applicant submit that traffic study, and then we can post it also in the Novus agenda.
Thank you.
So to that, Corey, can we get the posted traffic study and staff analysis from you and from the chief and from Kevin?
Yeah, we'll submit it to them.
So we'll have a full staff report with all appropriate
Yeah, I
folks.
think we can do that, Brent. I don't want to speak for colleagues that are lateral to me. Will the chief?
I like how you volunteered.
Corey, I will defer that authority to you right now.
Okay, they will review it.
Fantastic.
Okay.
So this is all, we all found out tonight. We had no notice, so there would be more people here.
There is multiple locations. So Utah Public Notice website is the best place where you actually can subscribe to this council's body. So whenever we have an agenda posted, you will receive notification of that agenda, and you will actually have access to some of the material, most of the material. And so Utah Public Notice website. So just go to eFrom, click on City Council, and down at the bottom.
Centerville.
That's my previous city, good heavens. All right, Centerville City Council. So yeah, click on Centerville City and then City Council, then put in your email address and hit subscribe to body. So every time there is any agenda posted, which it was generally posted on Friday, you will get an email with whatever that agenda is with the material, corresponding material. And you can do that with any of the bodies, including Planning Commission, where if you're interested, if based on what Councilor McEwen said, if during that process of conceptual, if it is approved for the rezone, that's where you can also follow it, so you can have public comment at that time and follow the entire process. So that is the best way. We also post it on the door at City Hall. We're required to within 24 hours in advance, but we do that on Friday as well. What's that? And it's on the front page of our website. So, but Utah Public Notice website is by far the best place to get that.
You missed the plug for YouTube. All of our deliberations are on YouTube, so feel free to log in. It's a great sleep aid, and you can watch us real time.
So that gives us various options where to find it. So let's, if there's no further discussion on it, let's vote on that motion. Starting with Councilman Ince.
Aye.
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 Looks like that motion passes 5-0, and you heard the terms of the motion. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for all your involvement. It's a great process. Can be very emotional as well too. So thanks for your attendance.
So is this where you need to catch your plane?
No, they said that it's put off till Thursday.
Okay.
So.
Can't believe I did that.
That's quite a delay. Is that from?
Speaking.
I was going to say, that's why people are getting. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, so I did look up the list, and Stephanie, you were the vice chair for the RDA. But it sounds like the chair will be here, so.
Yeah, in the absence of the chair, we were trying to figure out if there's a
But
pro
only
tem
till
mechanism.
January 7th, so shoot, almost.
So since he put off his trip, you don't get to exercise your mad power at the RDA.
It's the attorneys. They didn't have the documents ready.
Are you saying increased types of housing? So are you saying that if we put in a subdivision there that's already existing, the state can come in and include us?
I'd like a break for a second.
This is theoretical. We just know that things that aren't built are likely to encounter that.
Mayor, can we take a 5-minute break?
Yeah, hey, do I have a motion for a break?
Second.
Yes.
We have a motion, a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Even my house that was built when I was young and was a manufactured home that was brought to the site does not have any water.
We could. And part of it is
Well, that's what they say, but most of my siblings are from the state. I'm the oldest of 10. There are only 3 of us.
Well, I think it is good that you're on the other side. So this is your whole military days as an LT telling you 6 what to do. Is that your concern?
But it would put something on the property so that it don't.
For those days.
Whereas,
Alright, punch the bar.
denser housing, it doesn't have that. That's just the push that we done in the state, and they have talked about reducing our land use ability and jurisdiction. So it's just something that we want to do.
My buddy's dad. I mean, he has PTSD. His dad has PTSD, maybe not Vietnam, where a guy threw a gate hinge at me and hit the box, which saved my life. Literally happened. You got to toss him. This is crap. This is gate hinge. And he apologized. Shame on mine. But you know, maybe we're going to be based on
you want to see our version of how you got pictures of our PGs where they're in the middle of our road.
No, I'm with you. I'm glad you recognize that. You know, it didn't. It's the first contact we had. This is how it happened. We grind in, we get the own mausoleum, whatever.
And by the way, these are other storm pictures of
Stevenson Wall.
Yeah, right. Oh, it'll be at least some of this letter. Don't raise respect.
He pointed me to and I wanted to see when I was at city staff. The drainage was right, everything was to go. Everyone was propagating alternate drainage. So the tubes are now above. Drainage people have changed the downspouts. So it's just, there is drainage that has everything to do with it. Because our system, the drainage system is established by building. It's the operations after the fact.
You can't just give an elevation maps and say this is the drainage system. We turn it otherwise.
It didn't have enough water.
But he says that 2 would be
But I'm I can't come in here because you want to take, and this is my paper I want to write, by the way.
Good to have you. No, this is what the job is. I adore it when the room is full. So, and like Robin and Stephanie said, that's how we ended up deciding to sit up here, is spending some time down there. So think about that in your future.
See, this is what I'm saying. It's going to be a phenomenal study, and just to use see if it translates. It does. So wouldn't that not be a theocracy type one right there? Master's thesis, that was it. I don't need another one. I got as far as I need to go. I don't intend on teaching, so I don't need a PhD. How's your job? So you're a consultant? What are you? Thank you. I was chief of staff today. The person behind the scenes that what's that? Oh, yeah. Can't watch it right now though. It's so weird. Have you rewatched it?
Yeah, a few years ago. That was my trip.
But it was different watching it. It wasn't like from a different perspective. So I just started watching it. And everything was just a weird show. It was one of my favorites. YouTube's on, Mike's on.
Did you turn that?
No. You were supposed to.
It can't be 6 people.
Conversation about bill rights. And I thought you would turn them off. Is there an edit to YouTube? What's that?
I was going to push my cookie over to her. He has to figure out how much trouble he's in.
Council, let's start gathering.
His brother.
Good.
Calling council members back.
Everything's good. It's the scout camp syndrome.
I can give you more candy. There's caramel, there's peanuts in
I
there.
was gonna push my happy cookie over to her.
Oh, I know. No, I just wolfed down half a sandwich. It was good. I'm good to go for another hour at least. Did you have more than 4 bites? Yeah. It was a pretty small sandwich. I'll eat the other half later.
Well, the question is the wrapper still there, or did that go with the sandwich?
I think it's there.
You're not sure, but it did taste kind of pulpy towards the end.
It's all hazy blur. I just thought the bread was really old.
Good night.
I told him he couldn't go, but he went anyway.
Glad you threw one in my fast forward.
Oh.
Garbage can.
No, that's why I'm not that bad. I was like,
Got everybody back?
Yeah, I think we're all here.
Oh,
Good.
not Brant.
We don't need him to restart.
Leah, switching us back on.
Apologies, Jan.
This is what it's all about.
It's true. When we can pack a room, we're excited.
We're back from our break, and we're going to item number 3 on our agenda, which is summary action calendar. There's just one item on the summary action calendar. This is South Davis Metro Fire Station bond reduction and start of warranty period. Do I have a motion to accept the summary action calendar?
So moved.
Second.
The motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Item number 4 is the minutes review and acceptance from the November 19th City Council meeting. Do we have any discussion or changes of those? If not, is there a motion to accept the minutes?
Motion to accept the minutes as reported.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. City Council reports. Do we have any of the City Council members that would like to report on anything over the last 2 weeks or anything coming up? If not, we'll move to the mayor's report. Because of the Turkey Day, there was not a lot of activity. COG was canceled last week. We did have the outreach night that Viewmont High School did on Monday the 25th, and that I went to that event. It was a very good event. It was Ben Kerr and a band speaking on resiliency, and it was quite the event that was really fun.
Was the attendance impacted by the snow, do you think? Or
It was.
it full?
Yeah, they got a pretty good group out, but I think the snow affected it. But it would have been nice if more students were there. So.
Well, I was going to bring my kids, but my high schooler had just seen, they gave an assembly
Oh, did they?
with the band and band care, so.
I don't know.
It's hard to talk right to
So that defeats the purpose, yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, we had our Festival of Lights last night. That was a neat event, where we lit our park, and so now that's all happening. So I'll have more in a couple of weeks as the meetings start back up. City manager report. Brent?
That was great to see the discussion. I just have to say that I just shared that out there, that I always enjoy hearing the comments from public, and I always see it, I feel like we're apathetic. We have too many residents that are apathetic, and I wish more would participate, regardless of the content. I just always think it's helpful for our decision-making process. I feel like sometimes we make decisions we think are best, and then we wait till the reaction and we find out they're not the best. I wish we would have this all the time, where we had some input at the beginning to help us make the decision so we do it right the first time. Anyway, just wanted to share that I thought that was
Well, if you'd stop posting the notices in Ephraim.
it's we do that intentionally, so nobody knows where we are and what we're gonna go. I can't believe I said that. That's terrible. Sorry. Automatic sometimes. It's autopilot. As far as reports, Mayor and I met, and Corey met with UTA today regarding some possible routes that they were discussing with their BRT, their bus rapid transit, and the potential locations.
Oh, yeah?
And it's not impacting Centerville really at all. So what they were looking for a central location. I don't know if I'm allowed to release that just yet, but what they were wanting to know is how this impacts Centerville. If we're okay with the idea, there was very minimal impact, if any changes to Centerville at this point. So
At this point.
no dedicated lanes or anything crazy like that. No, no light rails.
Last
definitely
time
out.
they came to Centerville, the city council met with them, and we told them no.
No what?
No.
No to what?
No to bus rapid transit.
Well, so it's just the bus going through the city, not necessarily a central location here, things like that. So the conversation, the mayor and I will be attending a policy discussion, and they will be presenting those findings from that policy discussion. It was an update from a public hearing that they had in 2 different locations to let us know what the results were, and they'll be
I'm sure.
presenting that to us. So just FYI, just want to make you aware that that will be
Can
coming
I
this
come
way.
to that?
The policy discussion? It's a committee, so I won't be there per se. I'm invited to it, but I'm going to be out having a baby. Me
Steph
personally
can
having
take,
the baby,
Steph
so.
can take your place.
for you.
So the mayor, I don't want to invite on behalf of, that would be a
Okay,
conversation with
we'll
them.
discuss it off.
We'll discuss it later.
We're
Another
going to
item-
get him back to talk to the council again, but, but right now, yes, there's very minimal and really no impact, but if Bruce, Farmington, or Centerville.
What I think was actually fascinating in that conversation for me is Corey participated, invited Corey impromptu last minute, and it was really good to hear the history of the conversations that occurred from this council to the point of that meeting. We met with me, and I didn't necessarily have the background, so it was really fascinating to hear the background and some of those options. So anyway, there'll be more coming on that. And I'm not going to discuss that. That's all I have at this time, so I'm happy to address any
You've stepped
questions
in
that you
enough
may
for
have.
one day? Okay.
No, it's just I feel there's a conversation that needs to be had separately that I'll include later in the email. Any other questions for me? Groovy, thank you.
Thanks, Brent. If, I don't know, a need for a closed session, so if not, I'll look for a motion to adjourn from city council. We are going to redevelopment agency meeting, but, do I have that motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Well, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Council meeting is closed.